Hello, everyone. Welcome to another PCA Live 3 at 3 broadcast. I'm Joshua Habursky, the head of federal affairs for the Premium Cigar Association. I'm joined with Patrick Anderson of ProVenture Consultants, who works with the Premium Cigar Association. He's part of our federal team and has been actively working on our issues for quite some time now. And it's been a busy week, Patrick. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate it. And look forward to talking about some good policies that we're advocating for on behalf of PCA.
Yeah, it was a busy week in the lead up to this. We've been actively working from a federal affairs strategy for quite some time. Obviously, COVID-19 has presented us in individual government relations with some challenges of not being able to physically go to Capitol Hill, but we've adapted to those challenges and have been really, I think, more busy now than we have been in the past. We're having a lot of meaningful discussions with the administration as well as Congress, and we saw a lot of that come together this week and yesterday in particular with the launch of our economic blueprint for recovery. I think in the lead up to this, we wanted to get as many resources out there on health, sanitation for our members, provide all of the information on PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and other incentives and government programs to mitigate the problems that our retailers and manufacturers are seeing as a result of the coronavirus. And now we've transitioned into the point of, we're starting to see things reopen. Here are some guidelines that can get our economy back up and running. Here are some things that can help small businesses.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. It's been interesting to see how Washington D.C. has adapted to the COVID-19 crisis and the guidelines that came out from CDC. The Capitol complex was shut down, and there was a brief period of panic as legislators and lobbyists were trying to figure out, how do we communicate with each other? How do we make sure they have the information that they need, and they need to figure out how to run their policy proposals by us to figure out, make sure that it meshes well with the realities of how industry operates. But everything really came together rather quickly, and like you said, you can line up a lot of back-to-back Zoom meetings when you don't have to walk a quarter of a mile across the Capitol to get to your next appointment. So things have moved very quickly, and as we've seen, even with the policies like the PPP loans and things like that, Congress is able to move very quickly when they're motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it shows for several months we've been working to the point that we got on Wednesday and Thursday in launching this program, but we've been communicating with members of Congress and the administration on these priorities for several months now. And I think that it's important to note that, advocacy, PCA advocacy, and representing our members, not only are we, putting resources out there on an informational side, that there is that advocacy component, there is that lobbying component. We are on Capitol Hill and saying this would be positive for the industry. We want to create conditions that foster commerce, that support a growing consumer base of legal adults that enjoy premium cigars, and also support our brick and mortar retailers as well as our manufacturers. And I think all of those components came together into this plan. We kick off the economic blueprint with substantial equivalence and the pre-market review. And, in all of the points of the plan, which I encourage folks to read and visit on premiumcigars.org, it highlights our description, position statement of the association, and the justification. And I think the justification is the most important part. Those are the arguments that we're positing to elected officials and regulators of why this is necessary, why it will help your business, why it will allow you to continue to employ people in your brick and mortar shops and lounges. So, those compelling arguments packaged together, we've already seen over 250 staffers on the Hill read this document. We're very grateful for the industry press for covering the launch of this and getting a lot of the folks that are interested in the premium cigar and pipe industry looking at this. We simultaneously launched a grassroots action alert where you can actually support and send a note to Congress supporting all of the terms of this economic blueprint that we released. And that's that 1-2 punch. We talked in several PCA live interviews with manufacturers, with retailers, about the importance of the variety of voices and having the three parts: consumers, retailers, and manufacturers all together speaking one voice. This is a way that you can do it. We're going to message it to Congress, but we need that auxiliary support from all of you and to send that message. And you can go to cigaraction.org and actually do that. It takes literally 2 minutes. So we hope we get your support in sending those messages. But Patrick, I want to dive into the actual blueprint a little bit and some other things that we've been working on to provide a holistic update for our viewers on where things stand. And I'd like to start with tax policy. That's something that you, since we've been working together, have taken the lead on and have been, really the industry voice on premium cigar and pipe tax policy at large.
Yeah, so obviously, the tobacco industry at large is, one of the most heavily taxed industries under the U.S. tax code, and it's an area where folks in Washington have long felt they could go to when they needed additional revenue, and they would only be getting protests from the smoking population and not the non-smoking population. So they could jack those taxes up pretty high, and it became an easy source of revenue. But what the interesting part about that, though, is as you increase those taxes and we've seen sort of what the cause and effect is. We're not finding as much revenue coming out of those excise taxes for tobacco. And the unfortunate part about those taxes is that the current tax code doesn't really account for premium cigars. And so we just kind of get lumped in with everybody else, even though there's some really clear data, even coming out of the government's own research at NIH, showing that the premium cigar and premium pipe industry is really not a part of this public health epidemic that they talk about. Nevertheless, we're not given an avenue to be treated differently from the other sectors of the industry. And that really creates some problems for us, and particularly as we start going through, a COVID-19 type situation where the government is putting massive amounts of revenue into maintaining the economy, making sure that we can prop up small businesses so that they can survive this initial wave, and then move forward. And something has to pay for all of that. And what we don't want to see is people start leaning on these excise taxes that only affect a small number of industries, like the premium cigar industry, and rely on us to pay the bill for these things.
And that's an important point, because in the plan itself, we oppose excise taxes and any tax increases to premium cigars and pipe tobacco, whether that's coming at the federal level or the state level or even the local level. And that's something that, our state teams have been working on. In addition to the work that you and I do at the federal level, there have been proposals even in the midst of this crisis that have come up, and they've been working diligently to respond to those quickly. But at the federal level, we also oppose tax increases across the board, and that's a key pillar of the remainder of this year and going into the new Congress that we need to message that, this is the time to rebuild, recover, and revitalize, and eventually grow and thrive our industry for legal age adults. And, tax increases will not help keep the 30,000 employees in retail businesses employed and the 150,000 in other secondary and tertiary sectors that are here. The president was very clear in his executive order last week that he wants to find regulations that can be cut or postponed or streamlined where it will impact economic recovery and growth. And we have identified several of those. And I think the other key pillar of this, 4-point economic blueprint that we put together is the pre-market review and substantial equivalence. We've talked ad nauseum about that on other broadcasts. We continue to work with the administration, with the FDA, with NIH, and HHS, and get that message across. And that's why we chose to lead with it. I think that will continuously be our new deadline being September 9th. We have a closing window of time to really get regulatory relief there. And that's why we chose to lead with that in the blueprint. That creates regulatory certainty for the industry. Again, our North Star, or our guiding post for this plan, is to foster conditions for commerce for our industry. And our manufacturers cannot operate and introduce new products or retain the products that are on the market with the existing pre-market review and substantial equivalence rule in effect, and the millions of dollars and time that it would cost them in order to comply with something that is not meant for premium cigars or pipe tobacco, but meant for other mass market products. So, we've been carrying that water for several years. Our predecessors have done a great job in carrying that message, and we're really driving it home. And that's going to be something that in the coming weeks, in the coming months, we're going to see more of. We are, hopefully going to have an audience with the FDA as well as some administration officials on this rule in particular in the near future. And we're hopeful. There's been a lot of outreach that has taken place pre-coronavirus, and we thought we got to a point where we're nearing the goal line, we're nearing the finish line, and then obviously the challenges and the priorities understandably shifted with HHS. So it's now time to really resurface, and this economic blueprint is a perfect tool to re-engage with all of those stakeholders that we've been steadily working with throughout this process.
Yeah, the underlying message as PCA members are looking at this blueprint and reading through it, the underlying message in all of this is, government has invested trillions of dollars to try and maintain the economy during this recent crisis. And what we don't want to see happen is that major investment that has already been made to be for nothing, and just to have the whole infrastructure for small businesses, which at its core PCA is an association that represents small businesses, and to see that investment lost for the government. And we are building on what has already been done, the reality that's already out there, and trying to find ways in which we can keep these companies and member companies which are pushing through the crisis and now as we're starting to reopen. We don't want to be hitting folks with brand new issues like liability liability issues if somebody comes into a store and then decides and finds out that they get sick later on. And we want to make sure that consumers feel confident that they understand what it is when a store reopens, what are the policies that are in place to protect them. And we need to, and store owners need to have the confidence that if they're following those guidelines, they're not going to get hit with a lawsuit, tomorrow or the next year or the next year. There is a real tug of war that's going on right now in Congress trying to decide, what is the right amount of liability protection. We don't want irresponsible actors to be able to get away with doing nothing. But at the same time, we can't just have this open-ended book where folks who are trying to do the right thing, end up seeing themselves face lawsuits down the road.
Well, and that's another point in that 4-point plan of the temporary liability protection for, this is something specifically for retail members. We've communicated that about a month ago through a position statement, through a letter on behalf of the association from our president, John Anderson, and executive director, Scott Pierce. That we wanted to incorporate in the plan because that is something that is being debated as we speak. It could end up in, this next package that the House passed, yesterday and is going over into the negotiations with the Senate. I've heard that there's going to be some technical corrections, so the Senate may pass their own bill and not take up the House bill itself. But liability protection, as well as tax policy are the main points of our grassroots action where, anybody can engage that's in the industry and provide that voice. Again, we want to provide consistent conditions for you to conduct, business and commerce, and temporary liability protection is in line with that overall goal. The other one, and I want to talk a little bit about, is the Paycheck Protection Program. We've done webinars and other, content communications presentations on this in particular. We have a ton of different guides and updates on our COVID-19 resources page on the website. But, we put together a list of different reforms. A lot of it has to do with you as a business owner and providing you with the flexibility to spend the funds and the loans and the grants how you best see fit to sustain your business. And that's something where we believe, and we strongly believe, that you as the individual retailer and business owner know better how to spend these funds to sustain the business than government does. So we're urging flexibility with what you can use those funds for. Specifically, we've heard from our members through the different roundtables. We have communications calls with board members and retailers weekly. And one of the things that has come up in a variety of different forums has been that rental payments are a large cost center for any of the retail businesses and lounges, which is perfectly understandable. We want to allow you to be able to use a greater percentage of those Paycheck Protection Program funds for rent, for buying protective equipment. And that ties into another tax thing, which I'll shift to you, Patrick, on in a second. But, we want you to be able to buy those equipment, whether you're buying, face shields or sanitizer, hygiene, components of the guide that we released based off of CDC guidance. We want you to be able to purchase those products to make sure that your customers are buying products in a safe environment. And that would be something that those funds could be used for. But we're also seeking tax breaks for those. And Patrick, if you want to detail that would be great.
Sure. Like you said, Josh, these these provisions really all came out of discussions that we've had with retailers over the last couple of months, and trying to get a real, on the ground understanding of where the pressure points are, and what were the new challenges that folks were facing. And as retailers were shifting from face-to-face sales in store and doing more curbside or limited store access sales, we started to see PCA members making some rather significant investments, both to maintain proper cleaning supplies, sanitizers, disinfectants, having PPE wear available if customers were going to be actually physically in the stores and shopping. PPE for the employees who are there, often not alone, but working with their colleagues. And so, asking government to take note that these are not supplies that are traditionally seen as business office expenses, and that we should find a way to open up these expenses or these expenses for deductions, because they really are a part of everyday business life, and it's really just a recognition of reality. And I don't think that there's a lot of folks out there who would question that motive, but as with everything in Washington, it's all about how much does it cost, how much money does that mean the Treasury is not going to collect, and that's where you really start to run into some of the challenges. And so being vocal about these issues is really key, which is why it's great. We have cigaraction.org and the opportunity for folks to go onto those websites, find these issues, and literally with the click of a button, be able to contact their members of Congress.
Absolutely. And a lot of those deductions as it relates to the protective equipment, is applicable to both retailers as well as manufacturers. And another, incentive or initiative that we put in this plan involving tax deadlines, that's something that the manufacturers would really benefit from. If you could, provide a little detail on that.
The administration, I think, very wisely saw, the timing of COVID-19 hitting the United States and beginning its initial peak, coincided with tax season. So you had sort of two crises in one. But the administration saw that happening and made the decision in March to provide a 90-day extension for tax filings, and that applied to both income tax, which hits all small business owners, whether you're retailers or manufacturers, and then it also it provided another 90-day extension for the excise tax, which is predominantly paid for on the manufacturing side, and giving folks that extra flexibility, that extra cash flow, so that they could maintain operations, try to keep more employees engaged, make the investments that they may need for the future with respect to whether it's PPE or disinfectants, or adjusting their logistics plans to account for the changes in the economy. So that is in place right now, but it's on the verge of expiring. For the income tax side, April 15 got moved to July 15. So, we're about a month and a half away from that hitting. And we want to make sure that if we can get an additional extension on that folks have some time to prepare and plan. So, we're engaged in conversations with the administration that they use some of that latitude that they have during national emergencies to push back on some of these deadlines, and help businesses, manufacturers in particular, to hold on to some of that additional cash, and be able to plan a little bit better into the future before having to make those payments.
Well, and it's important with the plan that we provide a menu of different options for, our elected officials as well as the administration. We want to find common ground on as many areas as possible. And, we might have folks that will really look into this plan and take up some of the tax proposals. I think those are very, well documented and fleshed out. But you could also select the liability protection option and really fight for something there. We've had meaningful conversations. Just to provide a little bit of historical context, in 2019, our team conducted 300 congressional visits. In the past 3 months, we have not slowed down and have had over 65 interactions with members of Congress and their staff. So, we're on pace to really have a similar year in terms of our outreach. We've also increased our digital presence and our digital outreach, and are putting together programs that are a direct response to coronavirus and the constraints that we're in. But these will be lasting member benefits, so that you're getting your most benefit out of the advocacy portion and government relations portion that you can in building those vehicles, one of which is the town hall. We've already hosted 2 town halls that are exclusive to PCA members. We have another few that are being scheduled as we speak with different members of Congress, and we'll continue that throughout the year. We want to build relationships with our members and their elected officials. It is great for us to continuously engage with elected officials in the administration, but we really need the reinforcements. We really need the grassroots and grass tops advocacy and the personal stories that you bring to the table. I can honestly say we would not have this full-fledged economic blueprint had it not been for membership input, feedback, and outreach. This is a living document. This is not set in stone. At the concluding point of this broadcast, I'll talk a little bit about something that we're adding to this already. It's 2 days old now, but we want to make sure that we're providing a holistic approach where our industry can benefit across the board for these different pieces. And I think another important tax policy one, and Patrick, I want to get your take on this, is the business tax deduction, where it really creates an environment where it encourages more people to go out and purchase cigars for business purposes.
Yeah, it really illustrates the point that you were touching on, that with the PCA rebranding, the association really became first and foremost, to advocate for premium cigar and pipe retailers and tobacco interests there, but recognizing that the membership with PCA are really small business retailers, small business manufacturers. There's the consumers who are in love with the products and really see it as a passion of theirs. And how do we broaden sort of the reach of the association into more than just the advocacy on the premium cigar issues before the FDA? That is first and foremost the most important thing to hit, but there are so many other issues. And one of those that we identified, is the idea of business expense deductions. And traditionally, if you as a business were going out and taking a client out in order to negotiate a deal, build on that relationship that you have, celebrate the signing of a major procurement or something like that, you would be able to use those as traditional business deductions. It's the course of doing business. It's not just locked up in offices, but sometimes it's out on a golf course, at a concert, at a nice dinner. And in our case, that's cigar lounges. Cigar lounges are a traditional place for conducting business. About a couple of years ago, when there was the major tax reform bill passed, the business tax deduction for entertainment was eliminated, and so that took cigars out of the deductible part of those business expenses. But it also created some confusion between where an entertainment activity ends and a dinner, a business dinner, which still has a deduction, begin. And there are folks out there who say they are one and the same. If you are at a cigar lounge and you have food and beverage, that's all part of entertainment because the cigar was part of entertainment. There are others who differ on that opinion, but having those types of questions hanging in the air always leads businesses to err on the side of caution and instruct their employees, just simply don't engage in the behavior because we can't be certain of whether it's deductible or not. That takes money out of everybody's pocket who is trying to engage in commerce, and we would like to see those opportunities opened up. And especially right now, where we're seeing hospitality as the hardest hit area in the economy, every little bit that can help drive consumers to those lounges and help keep those employees employed and keep the chefs working, in the kitchen, keep the hostesses working up front. That is what we want to see doing, and so asking Congress to re-examine that business entertainment deduction and create some clarity so that we can see some of those deductions coming back and hopefully drive more business discussions into cigar lounges where they've traditionally been held.
Yeah, and I think, all of the topics that we covered so far, there's 4 key pillars of the plan itself. The FDA pre-market review, substantial equivalence, that's the first and foremost. Liability protection, PPP, Paycheck Protection Program reform, and then tax policy. And this is not an exhaustive list. I want to, be very clear that we will continuously take feedback from all of our members. Feel free to email me, call me, provide your feedback. Is there something that you identify that is a problem area that we can seek a solution through government for you, and work with our state teams? They've been doing an incredible job. So we want to make it very clear that one of your member resources is government relations. It's one of the foremost of the association. And I've been thrilled to be able to interact and actually on a one-to-one basis help our members during this challenging time and provide those informational resources and updates for people. And we'll continue to do that. One of the things that I mentioned that we're adding to this menu of options for government, there's a bill that was just released, HR 7011. It involves business interruption insurance during pandemics, similar to policies that were created before 9/11. After 9/11, you had terrorism coverage in these policies. This bill would provide business interruption insurance for pandemics and major health crises. It is triggered after $250 million is lost across the board. Unfortunately, it's not retroactive, but this is something that would be applicable to large cigar events. The PCA trade show, other major cigar industry events that are out there across the board. If there is cancellations or there's disruption in revenue, it helps a lot of the associations. So this is a bill that's sponsored by Carolyn Maloney that we will be supporting as a standalone option there. So we're continuously looking to identify opportunities, again, to create conditions that foster commerce, that support the industry and provide relief to our members. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Alan Gold in Chicago and John Hill in the Pacific Northwest for joining us. We see you there. Always good to have you on the broadcast. Patrick, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
The one thing that we've hit on a couple of times, and I think it really can't be said enough. Last year at the trade show, those of you who saw me talk about effective lobbying and how to use your business as an effective way to help communicate on the needs of the industry. We always went back to you as the business owner wear the white hat. You're the person that your elected official wants to make happy, wants to earn your vote. And so we can hit 400 meetings up here in Washington, D.C., and we can drive the technical points home with the folks who are writing the laws up here. But ultimately, you're clicking that button and taking 60 seconds out of your day to shoot a message over to the Capitol and get that point registered with your member of commerce is incredibly helpful, because that's what lets them know that they're being watched. And so, please, when you see those notices come across, take a couple seconds, click on it, and it's incredibly helpful when we're up walking the halls of the Capitol and meeting with the members, to be able to point to them and say, hey, you've heard from 35 of your business owners, and this impacts them, it impacts their families, and it impacts all of their employees as well. And they hear it, and it's a great tool, and so please make use of it.
Yeah, and across the board, if you're interested in developing a relationship with your member of Congress, we're happy to help facilitate those meetings and scheduling them. Just this week we had a great dialogue with Senator Perdue of Georgia, and Courtney Owens and Russell Wilder. They joined the call, both retail owners and part of the Georgia, in the leadership of the Georgia Premium Cigar Association. Now that we've shifted to digital, it's easier for us to connect the dots of retailers with members of Congress with us as staff and really approach it from the different angles. But again, thank you everyone for tuning in. I know that we have a full slate of interviews, 3 at 3 PCA Live discussions next week. Be on the lookout in your inbox for the release of that schedule. And again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the economic blueprint that we released, or our tax policy position, or any of the other materials that we covered in today's broadcast, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is joshua@premiumcigars.org. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks.